Most of the problems our country faces right now can be traced right back to our health. Might sound simplistic, but the corruption feeds off of the conspiracies to make and keep us sick, and addressing mental health problems with treatments that make mental health even worse is leading to skyrocketing violence and crime. We're covering the roots of our problems and the state of the election, the news you need to know, but with solutions and hope. Real quick, have you voted yet? The push is on for the right side, the red, to get out there and early vote. This is the first time I have went out there and done the early vote. And I live in Texas and in like a small county outside of Austin. And I was shocked at the long lines of early voters. A sheriff in line said, "Hey, I've been going around to all the early voting centers. They're all lined up, and so it's encouraging because if it's like that on day one, we already are hearing Nevada is beating early vote records when it comes to Republicans. So keep at it, make it too big to rig, and let's make sure we bank our votes. All right, well, coming up, we already know the FBI is corrupt, but we'll be covering how the agency is contributing to violence and crime with Able Child co-founder Sheila Matthews, and then Dr. Lafferty will be joining us with how we make the Maha movement work. But first, what most of us thought was a fun little jab at Kamala this weekend has turned into a nightmare fuel for the left and the mainstream media. That's right. Trump's enemies are melting down over his day at McDonald's, where he was a fry cook for less than an hour. But even that was enough to anger Brian Stelter. He wrote on X, quote, "The right is making Trump's McDonald's photo op into a 3-day story by saying liberals are losing their minds over it." Well, Brian, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. That's exactly why it's still a story, is because you guys are still losing your minds. CBS couldn't even bear to remain neutral when describing both of the candidates' campaigns. Take a look at how disturbingly partisan this segment was.
Election Day is just over 2 weeks away, and the fight for every single last undecided vote in battleground states is intensifying. Vice President Kamala Harris is targeting disaffected Republican voters by hitting the trail with Liz Cheney in the crucial blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Cheney was a powerful Republican congresswoman, and today she called Harris a responsible adult. As for former President Donald Trump, he was back in North Carolina again, pushing false claims about FEMA and immigrants. That's after he spent the weekend slinging a crude insult at Harris, engaging in lewd locker room talk about the late golfing legend Arnold Palmer, and staging a campaign stunt at a Pennsylvania McDonald's.
Unbelievable. It's like you can't even keep up with this. I mean, first of all, she says powerful Republican congressman. I had to write these down and remind myself I didn't want to miss any of these points. Powerful Republican congressman is how you're going to describe Liz Cheney. You're going to just completely leave out the part where she lost her reelection by the highest margin ever, I believe. And she says pushing false claims. So you have pushing, false, and then claims. Doesn't bother to mention what claims that Trump was falsely pushing. It's just he was pushing false claims. Again, the claims is that word they always like to use to make it sound as if he's saying something not true. So we got like 3 different adjectives in there, essentially: crude, lewd, and let's not forget he was staging. He was staging. I mean, this is just absolutely insane. All of these adjectives littered throughout news scripts suddenly. Now, because Trump just sent a letter to the Excuse me. And apparently that's not the only segment where journalists campaigned for Kamala, because Trump just sent a letter to the outlet demanding her full unedited 60 Minutes interview transcript be released. He is reportedly threatening a lawsuit. It's very telling the lengths Trump has to go to simply set the record straight, a job that should be the mainstream media's. JD Vance now understands that well as his running mate. He also had to defend Trump against the seething Democrats following the McDonald's appearance. Watch.
And the fact that these people are accusing him of a stage managed thing, of course, the president has to have security because there have been 2 attempts on his life in the last 8 weeks. He can't just walk into a McDonald's and sign a W-9 and actually go on the payroll. That's just not how this works, especially given the security threats on his life. But look, he was interacting with people. He was talking to the employees. He was giving people food. And he was just being, I think, what he does best, which is just being among the people, talking to them about what they care about. He showed, I think, genuine interest in the employees and their lives and where they came from and what they were actually doing in their job. And that's something you can't stage and you can't fake. That is just the genuine person that Donald Trump is. And it's why I think a lot of working people, even though, of course, he's a successful real estate billionaire, have this emotional connection to Donald Trump. You can't make up that kind of connection. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris has tried and failed. And I think it's why her campaign is flailing a little bit right now, is because she goes into Sheets and does 4 takes of her buying Doritos. Donald Trump just goes into McDonald's and he is who he is, and people love him.
Who would have thought that such a wholesome gesture would put the Harris campaign into panic mode? Tim Walz even went on The View to say that Trump disrespected McDonald's. Watch.
She actually worked in a McDonald's. She didn't go and pander and disrespect McDonald's workers by standing there in your red tie and take a picture.
Ironic that Walz's concern is Donald Trump being disrespectful when he oversaw the genesis of the BLM movement as the governor of Minnesota. Here's a McDonald's burning down in Minneapolis, by the way. Oh, what do you see there? Is that not disrespectful, Tim? Because we didn't hear you call that out. And talk about a campaign stunt. What about when Kamala kicked people out of diners to bus in her own crowd for an actual campaign stunt? I missed it. Did CBS call that a staged event? They didn't? What? They're not treating the campaigns equally? These people severely lack self-awareness. But a fake campaign is to be expected from a fake person. We still have yet to learn anything, if anything, about Kamala is real. During her town hall yesterday, the moderator admitted herself that the audience couldn't even ask Kamala questions. The questions were predetermined. This comes while we are also finding out that, shockingly, Kamala was never qualified for the law school she attended. As Red State reports, Kamala Harris graduated from Howard University without honors. She then applied to law school and was admitted to Hastings School of Law at the University of California. Wasn't an honors student at Howard. There's no information on what Kamala Harris scored on her LSAT. We do know that she didn't pass the bar on the first try when 80% of her classmates did pass. So how did a run-of-the-mill student and a daughter of a privileged upbringing, even her mom describes it as privileged, get into Hastings School of Law? Easy. She fudged her application. Harris was admitted under a program meant to make legal education accessible to those who come from disadvantaged economic and educational backgrounds. Kamala Harris went to a private school. Her mother calls her upbringing privileged. But we're not supposed to question if she knows what she's doing, because that is sexist. Then again, does it really matter whether she's qualified to be president when the Dems have plans to steal another election anyway? Here is the status on the election fraud front. Judges just rejected the GOP overseas ballot challenges in Michigan and North Carolina. So who knows how many illegitimate foreign ballots will be counted for those states, since they don't have to provide identification. And even if Trump wins, how will the Democrats react? It's the question no propaganda puppets will ask. But over at American Greatness, they did. Will Democrats accept the results of the 2024 presidential election? Remember, this is a party with no standards besides double standards. So with that in mind, there's nothing stopping them from going back into 2016 mode and saying that Russia interfered again to make Trump win. One of the newest leftist talking points is that Trump will weaponize the government and go after his political enemies. Too bad we've had years now of watching the Biden regime do just that. John Strand, a J6 political prisoner, just shared this. Prison warden admits the Kamala Harris DOJ has held Steve Bannon in violation of the First Step Act. I was also illegally abused by Kamala's DOJ and BOP. This is clearly continued political persecution. Her weaponized government will destroy anyone. Total thuggery. Now, for my good news segment, let's watch some good old karma for one of these leftist loonies. Watch this. Yes, she flipped the bird to Trump supporters, said F Trump, and rear-ended the person in front of her in the process. This is their mental illness causing harm, and the cops had to come around the corner. Now, totally switching gears, we do not want to forget the tragedy and fallout from the hurricanes. Unfortunately, the election news has dominated. So many other things are going on that we do not want to forget what these families are going through. You know, lost loved ones being the biggest one, but also lost possessions, some people losing everything. So here's a touching moment to share. Kids who are reported to have lost everything, yet can stand and sing Jesus Loves Me. Watch. So sweet. Well, I do want to make sure I include things like that, things that are heartwarming, inspirational, or just plain funny. So please send them my way, klgetgoodnews@gmail.com, klgetgoodnews@gmail.com. Well, up next, we're going to be trying to root out how the heck did we get here? You know, and really, I do think it's all rooted in health. Particularly, we're going to cover both aspects. Health in general and the mental health mess that we're in that is not regarded enough, and at least the response to it could be different, we'll say. And our next guest is going to be talking to us about that. But first, stark reminder to be prepared with everything that's going on. Going to be chaos either way, no matter how much how this election process ends up. So make sure you're stocked up on food. Don't forget the meats, the protein. You can get shelf-stable beef from ranchers in Texas that are premium cuts of beef. Watch this. Let them eat bugs, they say, or lab-grown meat, or worse. No, we want our real beef. And we need to get free from the rising costs because the prices are skyrocketing. So you need to go to klbeef.com, stock up on all American beef from ranches in Texas, from Prepper All Naturals. We don't want the mystery meat. This meat is no mRNA jabs ever. It's freeze-dried, stored in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers for maximum shelf life. We're talking 10 plus years without refrigeration. We're not talking jerky. We're talking about something you can just soak in water for 15 minutes, ready to eat. And these are premium cuts, New York strip, tenderloin, sirloin, chuck. Just use promo code KLB15 for 15% off your order. And actually, in light of everything that's going on right now, you can now use promo code STOCKUP35. That's STOCKUP35 for one of the largest discounts ever at klbeef.com. That's klbeef.com, STOCKUP35 for 35% off. Well, all of this is going on. Get it while you can. All right, guns are always to blame, of course, for mass shootings and other violence. But what about getting to the true root of the problem? Mental health. Clearly, we're missing something here. There's a thread that connects nearly all mass shooting tragedies, yet the agency tasked with investigating is ignoring the issue. And Sheila Matthews is sounding the alarm. She's the co-founder of the national nonprofit parent organization Able Child, founded in 2001 by parents who had their own personal experiences with label and drug coercion by the education system. It's committed to informing, supporting, and uniting others faced with all aspects of involving labeling and drugging children. Matthews is raising concerns now about the Federal Bureau of Investigation's omission of the use of psychiatric drugs when examining the common denominators among mass shooters across the nation. So please welcome Sheila Matthews. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having our organization on today. We really appreciate the coverage.
Absolutely. And it's something that we don't talk about enough, is that there is this common thread when you're able to dig down and find out, oh, where are they on medication? What kind of medication? And but when I did raise that with one of the last issues, some people were quick to point out, like, oh, well, you can't ask about that because of HIPAA. So what is your response to that?
Well, that's simply not true. I mean, these are criminal investigations. These are mass shootings or mass killings. They're murders. And Able Child, I started out with defending my own children from the school system, but now I'm involved in working across the country on these mass killings. And like in Sandy Hook, I did a lot of investigative work there for over a year. And we were successful in getting the psychiatrist arrested because he was actually having sex with one of his other patients. And that was never reported in the mainstream media. HIPAA does not protect people when they commit crimes. So all this hiding behind HIPAA is not good for our country. So Able Child has been working not only on Sandy Hook, but Tennessee, and now we're investigating the attempted assassination in Butler of President Trump, and the withholding of information by the FBI.
And what is their motivation for withholding that information? Why do they try so hard to hide what medications people are on that commit these acts?
Well, because of the money that's involved and the legislation that flows in the aftermath of these mass killings. So like in Sandy Hook, we had the bipartisan Safer Community Act, which attacked the gun industry. It bankrupted one of the gun manufacturers in Newtown. And then money flows into these new programs that get more and more children on psychiatric drugs. So now, because of Sandy Hook, we have the Safer Community Act, which now is making mental health clinics within our school system. So that's a really concern because that's all funded by the pharmaceutical industry. So it's a major.
Now, how do we balance this? Oh, sorry.
Really good question. How do we balance this? Well, right now,
Well, let me just preface it with this though, but before you go into the balancing of it, because I'm with you. Like, there is just way too much rushing to medicate, but at the same time, I have a teenage daughter, and when President Trump was shot at, she had sent me a text. I'm so sick of living through historical events. And that really struck me. And I'm like, wow, you as a teen have been through a lot, having to witness the assassination attempt of a former president. I mean, gosh, all of the effects of the pandemic on these young children. Some didn't get to graduate. Some didn't get to go to dances. They got their memories stolen away. They were thrown fear. I mean, and then don't even get us started on obviously the impact of the phone and how much of a difference that is with this generation compared to ours. So with all of those very real things that can contribute to anxiety and stress and depression, just with that being said, how do we as parents balance these things?
well, our organization was named after President Eisenhower's Able Child. And basically, our organization focuses on the diversion, what happened in the 1970s, where they diverted these grants for children to successfully learn communication and science and dealing with communication style, which behaviors are directly associated with how you communicate. Those grants were diverted into mental health. We have an abundance of mental health. Actually, we're ODing on mental health. And so for parents who are struggling with their children, there is no biological reason that they are. And the mental health industry and the APA say that they're claiming that ADHD and all these anxieties are driven by science, and they're not. They're just a checklist of behaviors. People lose parents and they go through depression. They lose children. They go through horrible situations. It does not mean you need psychiatry or these drugs. There's an abundance of community resources to help people through. But what we have been discovering is that the mental health system after these mass shootings are going after our guns. They're limiting our ability to have our Constitution in place, because if a child is labeled with ADHD, for instance, that child is being falsely labeled because the same checklist is that of the gifted child. So there's no brain scans, there's no blood, there's no way to determine whether your child has ADHD or depression or anxiety. So their market, the pharmaceutical market, is never ending. They have Americans of all ages on these drugs, and these drugs are linked to increased risk of violence and suicide, which they do not advertise in the schools, and they have them running across the commercials on the bottom. But a lot of these drug ads are placed in sitcoms. Oh, I just took my Zoloft or my Xanax, and so we have no ability to regulate the drug industry right now because it's filled with a lot of fraud and abuse. And so my organization is really focusing on a legislation that we have. Each state has behavioral health oversight committees that have kicked our organization off because they don't want us to reveal how many children in foster care are on psychiatric drugs and a cocktail of drugs. So we do an array of informed consent tools for parents on our website that they can print out and put in their children's files. You don't have to participate in these psychiatric analyses of your children. There's other alternatives. My son was never placed on these drugs, and he's a functioning adult. And so we have to combat this fraud and abuse. And in the mass shootings, like we just put out an article that's been picked up by the Gateway Pundit about the alleged shooter Crux. And the FBI is withholding data. And that is, when you withhold data, you're actually lying. Okay, so they are lying to us. They're telling us that this person was the shooter, but this person's body laid on the roof for 12 hours before the coroner got there. So there's a chain of custody in these, not only this case, but in Sandy Hook, there was a chain of custody with the issue of the body. So these are critical investigations that should include ballistic reports, toxicology reports, and right now we have no physical evidence of the mass kill, the assassin from President Trump in Butler. We just don't have any physical evidence. Could you imagine a crime scene is pointing out a criminal? This is the criminal, this is the shooter, but we're not going to give you the ballistics report. We're not going to give you the toxicology report. We're not going to give you anything that ties us to this person. So they didn't even tell us how they identified him. So they told us.
And didn't they rush to cremate the body as well on top of everything else?
Yes, they did. And so therefore we have no physical evidence that shows us that Thomas Crooks is actually the shooter. We don't even have the parents coming forward to say, We claimed his body. We cremated it. We are sorry, everyone, that our son did this, and we take responsibility for it. So right now, you have no evidence that ties you to this particular body on the roof. And so our latest article shows a picture of a young man in his 20s at the nursing home where the alleged shooter, Thomas Crooks, worked. And we're trying to determine, is this the actual photo of him? You know, the FBI is giving us photos of school pictures. Like you mentioned, you had a child. Do you know how much your child changes physically from a 10th grade to being 20 years old? I mean, I can tell you, I have two sons. They change their facial changes. And so our organization is striving to hold the FBI accountable. And these two latest reports that came out from Congress tell us nothing. And so what happens, like your question, why is this important? It's because then the money flows to more mental health, more taking our guns away, and we don't even have any evidence to base it on. So we're trying to focus on the child or the young adult that was on the roof, because that's where all the physical evidence lies, if that makes sense.
Wow. And so we're going to be talking more about the Maha movement, but Robert in the next segment. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has not only talked about the importance of making America healthy again. I can only assume that he means mental health included, but he is advocating for overhauls in the agencies as well that are withholding information. So how are you feeling about that? Do you think that if we're able to win this thing in November, that we'll actually see some more accountability?
Yes, I've worked with his organization, the Children's Health Defense, and also Reform Pharma. I love his organizations, and he's very focused on the SSRIs and their link to increased risk of suicide and violence. So we've been actually working with his teams and giving Able Child's information that we've accumulated over the last 22 years. So we're very hopeful that when he gets into a position there, that he can really weed out some of this fraud and abuse. So I was good. I always like to know the personal motivation. So how did you become so passionate about this very real problem we're dealing with? Well, I had two sons. My youngest one at the time was 7, and they were telling me to put that he had ADHD, and they didn't tell me there was no science behind it. And they also were pushing drugs. And I watched another mom testify before Congress right before I was going to go talk to the school. And I got her number. I called her, and she was like, "Don't do it." And she saved me, and she saved me my whole life with my kids. And that's what our aim is. We join forces, and we want parents to be informed and give their consent. We're not saying you can't use any psychiatric drugs. We're saying we want you to be as informed as possible and have alternatives like tutoring and communication skill building. So that's how I got started in it. And now my son, I could tell you, owns his own business, and he's 30. I can't believe how quick the time goes. And I've then worked in foster care. It's led me to work with Diane Sawyer and the drugging of foster care kids. So I've been kind of all over the map, but focused really on informed consent and now into these mass killings.
Well, it's scary. I mean, this is off topic, but I mean, I just recently did a story, covered a story about how one school district was putting sleep patches on kids. That's scary. I mean, that's not the same thing as, the substances we're talking about, but I mean, that was without informed consent, and there, was an investigation. The teachers were put on leave. I'm like, leave? They should have been fired. Like they're what? But yeah, I mean, it's so important that you're talking about this, and I do understand that some parents can get defensive because they're like, oh, this or that is helping my child. But we do need to get back to just like, well, what's it hurt to look at this again? Because ultimately, kids are kids. I mean, you would know the statistics more than me about like how much this has grown as an industry, and just common sense would tell you their brains are still developing. What are we doing?
Well, we have a great story on Able Child from the 1970 original hearings that were held on September 29th. I made a big thing of it. And there were 300,000 people, young children, and they were up in arms saying, we don't want our children labeled this way. We don't want our children on these drugs. They're dangerous. Now we've blossomed into well over, we're in the millions of children diagnosed like this, and we're moving away from education, and we're allowing the pharmaceutical industry with the psychiatric industry into the Association of School Psychology to dictate to us on how our children develop. They're the last people we should be listening to. I'm for sure that other organizations need to get into the school system that are trusted, that work on communication and able children and President Eisenhower's grants. So
absolutely. Such an important topic and thing that you're doing, Sheila. I love that you're continuing to go after and make this connection, particularly with the most recent events and Thomas Crooks and everything. So keep us updated on that. And yes, we'd love to have you back again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on. And please go to ablechild.org. We have a petition there. People can sign for hearings. Thank you.
Please check it out, ablechild.org. All right. Thank you, Sheila. We are going to continue the conversation on health, particularly this Make America Healthy Again movement. Now we're going to move it more to the nutritional side of things, although it's all connected. But first, speaking of health, I use the sponsors that I talk about. One of them is Native Path, and they have the most excellent collagen. Just watch this. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut, types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything, coffee, that's what I added to, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You can get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee. Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, ingredients. Get nativepath.com/get free. All right, so we've covered the mental health epidemic. Now we're going to talk about ways to potentially treat it naturally, as well as the rest of our bodies. And Dr. Lynn Lafferty is a doctor of pharmacy who's going to be joining us. She's a diplomat from the American Clinical Board of Nutrition, a naturopathic doctor, master herbalist, and a chef. As an endowed professor at Nova Southeastern University, Dr. Lafferty loves to teach and is committed to finding the safest and most effective means to promote health and wellness. She is joining us now to discuss this crucial topic of Make America Healthy Again. All right. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. And what you're doing is so important today. So thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, you bet. I mean, this is really exciting that we have an election campaign that is finally highlighting this as an issue. I mean, I can't remember any other election campaign that was really talking about health, in a really meaningful way, and the overhaul that we need to make here in America. And just for continuity of subject, you were sharing with me before we came on air, that you have concerns about the way that we address mental health as well.
Correct. And also, it's interesting because we have residents, these are doctors and pharmacists that have finished their schooling and they've taken their boards, but then they go on to do their specialties. And I was talking with my boss yesterday, and it's the first group that actually was in school full time since COVID. And we're seeing a lot of anxiety. I said, I think they've got post traumatic stress. We had one quit and he looked, and they all look very stressful. And he said they're very different than anybody we've had before. So I think there's so many things going on in the world. And I know for a fact, because I'm 65, my grandmother had a 150-acre organic farm. We didn't call it organic back there then, it just was, and she was too poor to buy the new chemical fertilizers, I guess. And, we didn't see all these problems in, children, both regular health. When I graduated from pharmacy school in 1981, I only had 2 patients and they were in their 70s who had type 2 diabetes. ADHD, we didn't see, they had that diagnosis, but it was very rare, and so on. So there's so many things today that I have to tell the students about that just weren't there when I was a kid or even when I was 25.
And it's wild when you listen to these commercials that are pushing all of the different medications, and of course, as is the case of all of those commercials, quickly at the end there's the disclaimers, and so often they say side effects may include thoughts of suicide, and it's like, wait a minute, I thought that that was one of the things this drug was supposed to address is protecting your child from those thoughts, but really it can be a side effect. And you say the proof is in the pudding that this is actually happening, right?
It's very scary to me. I've seen 3 cases of, and these weren't my patients, the young males, but one of them was the aunt of one very, very wealthy family. He was turning 16. He had a wonderful girlfriend. He loved school, and he was about to have a blowout 16th birthday party, and they find him hanging himself a week before. And I asked her, I said, go find out if they changed like his ADHD medication, if he was on an antidepressant. And that was true. And then another friend of mine, his nephew, 21, was at a USC football game, had a couple beers, and said, oh, I'll be back in a minute. They thought he was going to the bathroom. He went up on a garage, like 8 stories, and jumped. And then I just recently also heard of another case, and I'm waiting to hear back. They said he was on some types of medication, but I don't know if they changed the medication or what had happened. They say in the antidepressants in young people, there's a 4% chance, but a University, I believe, of Bristol in England took that data and actually refuted what the pharmaceutical company said and said that there's an 8% chance. And even more, and that's more disturbing, there's a genomic test that you can do, which means how your genes work. How does your liver break these things down? Some of these things aren't even effective, or they might be even way too effective if you have certain genes or things like that. And that's a test that could be done with these young people, and no one is doing it. I was talking to a group of students today about that. And I learned all about pharmacogenomics. I had to go back to school to get my PharmD because we didn't have that degree when I was in school. And I had a whole course in pharmacogenomics, and then there's also something called nutrigenomics. But unfortunately, they don't even learn this today. It was supposed to be a big thing where people and insurance companies should be paying for this before people are put on drugs to see do they. A lot of chemos, for instance, you know how chemotherapy is very can be deadly, cause all sorts of really horrible side effects. And they can test a lot of those to see if it's going to work because a lot of them won't even work on you. But I just
Mm.
don't see. people doing this before they're getting the treatment even, which is sad.
Yeah, which just has me thinking, wondering if you know the answer, because I just thought of, with we're now well aware that many of the vaccines have liability protections.
Mhm.
What's the case when it comes to a lot of these now very common medications of ADHD and antidepressants? Do they also have liability protections?
I don't believe so. Not no one has anything like what the pharmaceutical companies were able to get for the vaccines. And it's very sad because, back then they didn't put a lot of these adjuvants and additives and things in vaccines like they do today. And it's really the adjuvants and that's part of the problem. One of
Yeah.
our professors here, he's 82. He's like in the category of winning a Nobel Prize. And he's
Mm.
at the point where he really doesn't care what he publishes but the truth. And he talks about there's something called methylation in the body. So most of the vitamins you buy off a drugstore shelf, your body does not use that vitamin. It has to convert it. So for instance, folic acid has to be converted to tetrahydromethylfolate. You get that if you take cow liver or vitamins made from pig liver or something like that because the animals use the tetrahydromethylfolate. However, about 22 to 25% of us, we can't do that. And about 99% of kids have that, what we call a SNP, where that methylation doesn't work properly. So, what happens, and what his paper he just published is about, they put so the first step in immunity is inflammation. So, the more inflammation you have, the more immunity you're going to have at the beginning. So they put in a heavy metal called aluminum in a lot of vaccines and it's on the CDC website and it's called an adjuvant, and why they add it is to hyper excite your immune system so you get this real surge of inflammation. The unfortunate thing, there's something called homocysteine in the body that causes a lot of inflammation. And if you don't methylate your B12 and your folic acid, then you get hyper inflammation in the brain, especially this homocysteine affects the brain and the heart. So
Mm.
that's basically what he's talking about in this article, where you're getting this hyperinflammation in your brain and you don't have the brakes. That's why a lot of people died from COVID. They got this hyperinflammation from the virus, but they didn't have the brakes because there's something called cytokines. Some are inflammatory and some are anti-inflammatory. So if your immune system isn't strong enough, you could have way too much inflammation, and then that just starts a cascade of not being able to breathe and breaking down different things in the body. So anyway, that's what he talks about in his study, that it's the aluminum that causes this hyperinflammation because the autistic children are not making the breaks. They can't
Mm.
handle that much inflammation. That's why a lot of people go, well, my child took those vaccines and didn't get this same thing. It's because of the 75% don't have this problem. And then the problem, I have the problem, but it never affected me. But I only had a couple vaccines in my life. So, but if you take a lot of these vaccines together, so I hear a lot of stories where they took 5 or 10 at the
Mm.
same time, and then all of a sudden, they spiked a huge fever, and that's what happened there. So this could all be resolved if we gave a child the test before they took the vaccine to see if they can handle it or not. So there's so many resolutions to things that doctors don't even know about. So I write about this and I talk about it. I have a course called Become Your Own Health Investigator, and you could find everything I'm talking about. Usually, if you go to Google and you put scholarly in, you can find the same journal articles, not as many as I can find in my medical library, but you can find a lot of good information. The information is all in there. So what I try to do in my course is to teach the basics and then show them how you can find it on your own, and you can find resolutions like, does ginger work here, or turmeric, or olive oil, or fish oils, or whatever. How do those work in the body? Because a lot of diseases, especially when you get older too, it's about inflammation, and those are very
Yeah.
powerful. The fish oils, the turmeric, the ginger, very powerful anti-inflammatories, which don't do damage to the body. They actually kill cancer 5 different ways in the
Mm.
body, or they help increase your digestive enzymes so you can digest your food better. So there's just so many things that the plant world has that they can offer. So in my course, I show people how to do recipes, how to make your own tinctures, all of those types of things that you can do from your home.
Yeah, and I mean, this is becoming more and getting more exposure because of this Make America Healthy movement and the unity
Yeah,
we're seeing between a former Democrat, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Trump. And so it's getting more exposure, but you're saying that rather than wait and see how this ends up, because who knows what's going to happen in November and beyond, you can just go ahead and take control of your health right now. And
right.
how does that work exactly? Do you have to start with the course, and what are you going to take away from that?
Well, I to be very can I if I can be very honest with you, you know more than
Yeah.
most of the medical students do when they graduate. And
Wow.
I, it's and this isn't really a joke. I just behind me here. I just want to show you, just
Yeah.
for
Go for it.
instance, here is one of my books. This is from 1978, and see how thick it is. Okay, this took us a year. Medical students and pharmacy students took that in a year. That shows you how every drug works, how poisons work, how you can chelate them out. It's got about 400 pages about vitamins and how they work in the body, what they do. Um, they don't take pharmacology anymore. Now, why would you the drugs from I took that in 1981. The drugs now have black box warnings that say they can kill you, sudden death, cause cancers, whatever. There's 1,000 more drugs. They're 1,000 times more dangerous. Why would they now take what they call pharmacology? It really isn't. 6 weeks, because why would they need to know the bad effects of how all these drugs work? They also don't take medical physiology, how the body works. That got taken out 12 to
Mm.
15 years ago. That's why
Wow.
a lot of people that come see me, they go, I went to all these doctors. They told me I need a psychiatrist, or they just send me to another doctor who tests more. And then at the end of the day, after I went to 7 doctors, they said I have chronic pain syndrome. They don't, and they're medical students. I have a website for doctors and pharmacists too. Um, I have students. I just spent a $500,000, Dr. Lafferty, and I don't know anything. So they get the basics of what these courses give you in my 20-hour course online. And then we go over the natural things like how they work, because Motrin, Aleve, those drugs, ginger and turmeric work the same way, but they don't have the negative effects that the drugs do. Like I said, they actually help your liver, help your stomach instead of destroying it. So
Yeah,
they learn
absolutely. I
all
mean,
of that.
yeah. So what got you on this path? Because, I have a family member that is a doctor, and, we got kind of in spats like during COVID, because she was all about just, well, this is what my medical journals say, or this is what,
Right,
like, and so I'm not, I won't even look at any or listen to any other doctor. Like, I'm just listening to the notices that I receive at my practice,
right,
and that's all
right.
she would do. And
Right.
it's just so frustrating. So how did you break free from I guess that what's sometimes seems like a cult now, like, the mainstream docs, if you will.
Mhm. Well, I guess knowledge is power, because basically, and pharmacists are different than medical doctors. We have different personalities, and different backgrounds. So we're more scientific because we have to be. If I'm compounding something for you, if I put too much, I could actually kill you. So I don't have room for, what Fauci says, let's say.
Yeah.
Um, so that's what she was listening to. It My grandmother, when I was a kid, she told me that she had cured 20 people during this really bad flu. And she was talking about the Spanish flu in 1920, which
Yeah.
she she was in upstate New York near the Finger Lakes, and we were by our elderberry trees. So the first thing I did, I went and I put elderberry and coronavirus, and sure enough, a different type of coronavirus, the SARS Middle Eastern, had broken out in a nursing home, and they had used elderberry extracted in alcohol. So we went and they let me in the pharmacy because it's a good company. Got that made by an herbal company. I can tell you that the COVID didn't even last 3 days. I didn't have one patient that went to the hospital. And then,
Mm.
there was a study that, we had learned about in one of my courses, somewhere, where vitamin D, they'd given vitamin D to, hospital employees in Toronto, Canada. One group got vitamin D, the other got the flu vaccine, and vitamin D actually worked better. They had less flu. So I went and looked up infections, and what I found was any infection in the hospital, viral, bacterial, fungal, the people all that died from any of those infections, they were vitamin D deficient. So the more I looked in the library, I find, oh yeah, there's so many of the immune cells that work in your body to get rid of these things and repair and whatnot. They have vitamin D receptors on them. And then, as a pharmacist, we've always known about zinc because we've always, for 50, 40 years, sold zinc lozenges, Zicam, all these zinc products, and I always knew it worked like a Teflon coating to stop the virus from coming in. But I found, when I went to the library, I found all these articles talking about how zinc will stop the virus at the cell, and then it also will stop it from replicating within the cell. So, looking at all of these different things in the medical library, and any doctor that came in here, I showed them those articles, and it was very cool because about a year ago, one of the attendings, he runs a family medicine practice at the residents at the county hospital here. He said, because of you, none of our patients on our team died of COVID. And I go, because of me. I didn't know what he said. Remember all those studies you showed me? He said, if they had COVID or not. I said, we're putting everybody on vitamin D, zinc, and vitamin C, no matter what. And so, but he also said they didn't, and this is the killer, and this is goes to what your doctor, okay? Because I would love you to show her something. Um, so he said, no one died at the hospital till they took our hydroxychloroquine away. Well, uh, there
Mm.
was a big study. It wasn't a big study. It was they put this. It, okay, there's journals that are very famous, and you always used to think these are like your gold standard. And one was called the Lancet, and the Lancet put out hydroxychloroquine might kill all these people because of their heart. Now, I've seen that drug for 40 years used. My boss at the time,
Yeah.
she's in her 70s, a physician. She's used it for 50 years. We've never seen one side effect from it, but
Yeah.
it got retracted. So I have not had one student or one doctor when I do these presentations. How many of you know this was retracted? None of them
Yeah.
know. So I want you to
Of
show
course.
her, because that
Yeah.
put an arrow and discredited them to me in the medical community for years to come.
Yeah, it would be good to show. Well, I'm out of time, Dr.
I'm
Lynn
sorry.
Lafferty, but I'm sure we'll have you back. No, it's okay. I'm sure we'll have you back again. Go to drlynlafferty.com and anyone can learn about your courses there.
Yes, I have many free courses on the immune system, on what integrative medicine is. I have a lot of blogs like on ginger and turmeric and all different types of things. Watch this video. It tells a lot of what I've talked about today. So I have a lot of free things on there. And then this course, it's $150. But if you put hero in, because your listeners are so great and you're a hero for what you're doing, you'll get 20% off from that price, and you'll have the course forever. And then there's also a booklets on vitamins that I've made up and how to make some herbal remedies. So I hope that they'll join.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And we'll be talking to you again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Here's the verse of the day, real quick, but mark this. There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying its power, have nothing to do with such people. Sound familiar? But that last part really gets me, having a form of godliness, but denying its power. Check yourself. Do you have a form of godliness, but you deny its power? Can you step up the faith of having the Holy Spirit and knowing you have that power? And that verse is from 2 Timothy 3:1-5. You can join me on Locals to look more into God's word and prayer and fellowship Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. A show special on Locals for fellowship and God's word. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget to spread the word, share with friends, get free with KRISTI LEIGH.